LCARA Ham Radio presents a Time Machine Tuesday vintage video release.
Welcome to Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. You can find us at LCARA.net, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. If you're enjoying the videos we're producing here at LCARA, please help our club out by hitting that subscribe button. Also, give us some feedback on our videos. Click the like button, share with anybody who may find it interesting, and be sure and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified of the next video release. Hello folks, this is Chris, KY4CKP, and this is part 3 of our series on hopefully becoming or getting some interest in using some of the modern technology to be an effective and efficient operator when we're on our radios. And so in the first two sections we talked about software-defined radios and how those might be able to help us augment our time on the radio. In particular, we took a look at the RSP1 Alpha from SDR Play and the SDR Uno software. And we're seeing that here on the screen today as well. And then we also talked about logging software in part 2. And we talked about the one that I like to use, which is Log4OM. And it has some pretty nice features. And there's some other similar things like N1MM plus logger. And also, of course, using things like QRZ.com to look folks up, look up the call sign, kind of see who they are and where they are maybe in the world. And I happen to use that for my logging for now at least. You can use Logbook of the World and EQSL and other things. You can use a pen and paper, and you can use a spreadsheet, whatever you'd like to use. But I like having the digital capacity and capabilities there. And so we talked about each of those individual components and how they can help augment our time on the radio. But we have also mentioned, and we wanted to talk about here in this third section, actually getting interactive control with your radio, having rig control, and what it would take to potentially do that. Of course, every situation will be a little different. Depends on what radio you have and some things. I'm on Windows, and I have the Yaesu FT891 radio. It does have USB out and has some slightly limited functionality, but it can give me an ability to do some level of rig control. And so we just wanted to show kind of what it took to get to that point with this particular setup that I have. And I think it's a lot of fun. I do work with computers for a living, but I kind of figure if I want to spend some time with my main radio here at the shack and I'm sitting in front of a computer already, I'd like to try and take advantage of that as much as possible at least. And so one of the first things I want to talk about here is one of the kind of main pieces of software. So let me just open up its little window. And that is something called OmniRig. OmniRig. Hopefully you can see this little window that popped up. OMNI-RIG, OmniRig. And this is really a fairly simple piece of software. What OmniRig does is it allows us to define some COM ports, some communication ports. So it allows us to do that, and you can see here it's got a couple of tabs, Rig 1 and Rig 2 if you actually had a second radio. So I've got things configured for Rig 1, and that is set up as COM 4 on my system. So we can see that OmniRig has been configured and set up. Now if I open up Device Manager, let me bring in a Device Manager window. So if I bring in Device Manager, we can see when I come down here to the ports section, COM and LPT, communications and printers, and we expand that, we can see that in fact COM4 has been created, and in OmniRig, if I click on Rig 2, we can see that one is defined as COM5. We can see that COM5 has been created as well. So that's what OmniRig allows us to do. It allows us to create these COM ports, and then we can use those for various software and things. So it's a really pretty simple piece of software. Now, I'll go ahead and get rid of this Device Manager window. Just wanted to show that. With OmniRig, you may have to spend a little bit of time. You may have to go to a couple of forums, look up your radio, and then, of course, depending on what operating system your computer is on, whether you're on Mac OS, maybe even pure Linux. Again, I'm on Windows 10. And you may have to play with a few settings. What I found that works well for this FT891, I went ahead and defined COM4. I've got the radio, and I'll put the picture in. I'll inset the picture there of the configuration on the radio itself of 38400. Basically, if you use the old term, if you've worked with some computers a little bit, 8 in 1. 8 data bits, no parity, 8 in 1 or 8 in 2. How many stop bits? This is getting, in a way, a little bit technical, but you don't have to know everything there is to know about serial ports on a computer. I've found in the SDR Play folks found some suggestions that they recommend 2 stop bits for your configuration for the SDR Uno software-defined radio program and use with their hardware, the RSP1 Alpha. A lot of times, historically, if we had a serial port, we might have used 8 in 1, 8 data bits, no parity, 1 stop bit. But here I've got it configured for 2 stop bits and high RTS and things like that. So I spent a little time, kind of got that figured out. So we've got that configured. So let me just bring this over here for a second. And here in the top of my monitor, I've got all 3 main components I usually have spread across 3 different monitors. But SDR Uno's here at the top. You can see towards the bottom left we have log4om, and you can see I also have just a web browser open with qrz.com open, so I can look up call signs and things. Well, let's go to the main SDR Uno window, and it's the one that has the buttons where you can change your bands and things like that. And each one of these windows, and there's different windows and things you can have open for SDR Uno. You can kind of customize it and you know, whatever you want to see and that kind of stuff. But for this kind of main window where you can see the main frequency set and that kind of stuff, you know, whether you're lower sideband, upper sideband, volume, all that good stuff. Upper left corner for that one, settings little button, and you see there's several things in here, little left right arrows. But you can see there's a section for CAT, right? Computer control. You could be running things that way. Maybe you've got a direct CAT type cable for your radio. But what I've got set up, and you can see for SDR Uno, there's actually this tab up here that's called ORIG, and that does specifically stand for OmniRig, and it is designed specifically to work with that piece of software. And so we saw that we have, and let me bring it back to the foreground, we saw that we had OmniRig set up. We saw that we had COM4 configured, so that's what I've told SDR Uno to work with. I said use so-called Rig1, and in Rig1 and OmniRig, I've got that configured. And I want to sync, you know, from the radio to the software to the radio, and have control. So it's relatively that simple. Again, you might have to do a little bit of looking around, depending on your radio and your operating system. You might use something other than OmniRig. There's probably things similar to that that would work with other OSs, or maybe there's a version of that. But it was relatively simple to get this running. I was reasonably impressed. And that way, you've now got those 2 components working together. So whenever I change things in SDR Uno, like if I use these buttons up here to change the band that I want to be on. Currently, if you can see up there, the orange highlight, we're on 40 meter band. You can see that, you know, 7150. If I click 20, it takes us over to the 20 meter band. Well, it just took my radio to the 20 meter band, right? I don't have a real good way to record the radio at the same time, but that's the point, is it's now controlling the radio. So you can switch bands that easily. Let's go to 80 meters. You can take a quick look. So you can start looking around the band, 17 meters, 18 meters. You can start hopping around that fast. And what I like about the getting into a level of radio control or rig control is I don't have to do quite so much through the front panel of the radio itself. I'll still do a couple things over there. Right now, I still do volume control directly on the radio itself. Of course, here in SDR Uno, whatever it's hearing, like looks like we have a signal right over here. Of course, it has its own volume. Let's just unmute that for a moment. Got a weak signal. I don't know if you can hear some voices in the background there. We don't have anything real strong right now. Check out this other signal for just a moment. Yeah, there's just not anything real strong right at the moment, but it's of course got its own noise reduction and various things. And as I mentioned in the previous video, my radio is far more sensitive than the SDR Uno. It will help you spot signals. It'll help you spot what's going on. But there are definitely times where I can actually hear something fairly well through the radio that is not showing up graphically in the waterfall here on SDR. It does a pretty good job, and it's a great, again, augmentation to what's going on. There's a little stronger signal. I don't know if that person's going to talk very long. But of course, again, it has its own volume and that kind of stuff as well. So we now have rig control through one application. We now have rig control through the SDR Uno software with our software-defined radio. Well, so again, OmniRig, it's pretty simple. It lets you create a couple of COM ports, and now you can point your applications in your radio and have some rig control. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window. That's about all there is to see about it. Again, the version, we'll talk about the version briefly. 1.19, and let me bring in a browser tab for just a minute. Down there, you get this, and you can see the address dxatlas.com/OmniRig, and you can go grab a free copy of this 1.19. It's been around for a while, works pretty well, and it doesn't cost anything to set this up. So it's kind of nice that that piece of the puzzle is available and was free. So that's where you can go get a copy of OmniRig. Now, there is somebody who's been developing what they're calling OmniRig 2.0. My understanding is that does not work with the SDR Uno software, at least not yet. Hopefully that will come a little bit later. And I'm not sure if that works with the Log4OM software quite yet. But of course, that would just one of the things we keep an eye on for any particular updates for software and things that may come along over time. So that's OmniRig. Let you set up a couple of COM ports, and then you can configure your radio and your software to run through those COM ports, and then we can get this entry level of rig control. Even for a relatively modest radio like the FT891, it's a very nice little radio, but it's not real expensive, and it doesn't have some of the higher end features, but we can at least achieve a level of rig control. So we've got rig control set up and working now with SDR Uno. That's nice. Let's go back over here and take another look at Log4OM here in the bottom left corner of my window, and let's go into its settings. So as you can see, we go under settings, options, and you can set up your station info and some of the settings for the software if you're going to log to a particular log site. I've got it set up for QRZ. You can see there's a tab right here, which is what we want to look at right now, and it's called Cat and Clusters. Now the clusters is that feature we talked about, and you can see it peeking in down there at the bottom of the Log4OM window. That's where when people make contacts, they can report it, and then everybody gets to see that. Everybody gets to see who's active right then. So that's what they're talking about with the clusters. But we've got this section here called Cat, right? Again, computer control. And look, it's got a section for OmniRig. OmniRig's been around a while, and a number of software packages can work with it, along with other things. You can see HAMlib, and you can have an external, like physical cable and things. So again, I'm going to go through OmniRig. So I hit that section and open the Cat, open the cluster so I can see it. Cat will be able to change things interactively with the radio, and you just enable it, right? We configured OmniRig, and now these other software programs can run through it and use it. So that's how I've got Log4OM configured, running right through OmniRig. And again, if I were to click on or double click on one of the listings here, so we're currently on 40 meters. Let's look at our list. New Zealand was talking not too long ago. If I click on New Zealand, that listing one time, looks like they're active because they just popped up again at the top of the list. If I click on that, it'll look up look up that call sign, and if it can find it in QRZ, I can do a lookup. So if I click lookup, we kind of talked about this the other day in the second video, it'll open up a tab, and if the internet's going to work for us, it'll open up a tab to QRZ. It'll look up that log sign. You can see it's trying at least to go to QRZ. QRZ is running a little bit sluggish maybe right now. There we go. Pulls up QRZ, pulls up the call sign, and lets you look it up. All you have to do is click on it and go to the lookup button. But the other thing we can do, again, now that we've connected Log4OM to the radio through the OmniRig configuration, if I double click on that listing, it actually took my radio to the 7150 listing. And you'll notice that Up here, of course, in SDR Uno, it's showing 7150. If we have any other, see if we have anybody else on. Yeah, New Zealand's been a little bit busy. Barely hearing them. Yeah, I'm barely hearing that. Let's open up the. Yeah, the radio. It's really soft on the radio, and it's not even really coming in through SDR Uno right now. And that's the thing. You'll find that sometimes. Belgium just popped in 7172. You see everything switched over to 7172, including the radio. So now we have this interactive control between two kinds of software and the radio, and we can work with that. I can manually tune on the radio and look both software packages update in real time, or at least near real time. So we have this interactive sort of three-way control. In SDR Uno, I can click on a signal that I see in the band, the waterfall, and I can drag that around. And I can go there, and it updates everything. I'm going to tune. That's probably 72. Let's see if we can hear. So we've got somebody right there. We've got another signal right over here. Not sure exactly what the frequency is, and there, of course, people talk intermittently, and sometimes you only hear one side of the conversation. But that's what's kind of nice about this. A pretty simple, free piece of software. A USB cable. Now, the kind of USB cable that a lot of radios are going to take, I know the FT891 is this way. It's known as an A to B cable. An A to B cable. In fact, let me look one up. I've got another browser window open. USB A to B. Because A to B cables are not as, let me just bring up some images here. And let me bring this over into to what we're seeing. So A to B cables, some of you might remember these. We don't use them as much, especially anymore. Sometimes we call them a printer cable. A lot of times USB connected printers use these kind of original classic, what we're called A to B. The A part we're kind of used to. That's kind of the flat part that everything still has today. But it's that more kind of square as opposed to horizontal component. That's sort of the B of the more original style cables. So a lot of printers tend to use these. Some radios tend to use these. All right, so you can look on the back of your radio and see if it has that kind of a port. That's what mine takes. Now, I was fortunate. I had a couple of these cables laying around from various printers and things. If you don't have one, you can still get these on Amazon or your shopping of choice. Finding one of these in a retail store, maybe, maybe not. They're not as common as they once were, but certainly online, there's eBay and multiple sources where you can find those A to B cables to do that. All right. So we've got our cable connected to the radio. Radio's connected to the computer. We've got our virtual COM port configured through OmniRig. We've got our software configured through OmniRig, and we now have a version of Rig Control. Now there's one more component. I'm going to close a couple of these windows here in this little browser since it's not very big. There's one more component we want to talk about, just kind of briefly. And it's what helps make a lot of this interactivity flow a little bit better and a little bit nicer to deal with. There's another piece of hardware that I have in the mix here that kind of greases the wheels and makes things a little bit nicer. So let me bring in this other tab. And this is a hardware device from MFJ, right? Our buddies over at MFJ. And it's the 1708B edition -SDR. And this is a little, and I'll put a picture of mine connected to my RSP1 Alpha. But you can see this is their web page. It's a little box, not very big. Again, I'll drop in a picture here of mine. But what this does is you can see it has some antenna connections. It allows you to connect your main antenna to this little box. And you can see it's kind of a splitter, has two more connections. Then you take a jumper and you take one connection to your radio. And you can take that other connection to your software-defined radio. So that's in fact what I've got going on. I've got this little box sort of in line with everything. And the job of this little box is to split the signal so your radio can see it and the software-defined radio can see it as well. But the other job of this box, and you'll see it described as RF sensed or RF sensing. So the point of this is when I go and when I push the mic button on the radio, I'm about to send out a significant amount of power. If we didn't do something about that, it would damage the software-defined radio. Okay, so what we want is something that will allow us to bring the incoming signal to two radios, but then when we transmit on the transceiver, the main radio side, we don't want that outgoing power signal to damage the SDR. And so this switches and prevents that from happening. So that way you can have the incoming to both sides, but the outgoing is not going to damage your SDR. And so it's RF sensing. Now you can do a manual way of doing this. I've got the settings for this little thing tuned up so it responds as fast as possible, and it shouldn't allow anything to damage the SDR. So far, it's been working great for several weeks, a couple of months now. So that's the other sort of magic piece of the puzzle: a free piece of software, and then a piece of hardware that does cost a little bit of money. Right? You can see the price there, about $120. This stuff's not necessarily for everybody, but if you want to slowly work on setting some things up, you can use SDR software by itself. You can use Log4OM by itself. Okay, Log4OM you could set up with HAMRadio and have that control. Right. If you want to have kind of all three things going, have the interactivity between all three: the physical radio, the logging software, and the software-defined radio and its front-end software, then this little switch would be something similar to this you would need. So free piece of software, well, two free pieces. Log4OM is free, and then you get SDR Uno if you buy the SDR Play unit, and then this little switch. So this is what I've got configured to use these pieces of software in conjunction with each other interactively and have radio or rig control. And that way I can quickly spot who's active, where they're active, change my my band. As we're looking here, we're currently on 40 meters on the radio, but I'm looking here, I'm seeing some activity in Spain, in Brazil, and the US on 20 meters. So if I want to switch over, I can just go to SDR Uno, hit 20 meters real fast. Everything just switched over to 20 meters. The radio, the logging software, of course, SDR Uno itself. And of course now its waterfall is going to begin showing me 20 meters. And right now we're not really seeing a whole lot. Again, even when I don't see a whole lot in this waterfall, I can check my radio. I can go to any of these signals down here in Log4OM. You can see that 14222, somebody from Brazil was on. If I double click that, takes my radio, takes itself, and of course it also passes back over to SDR Uno. Everything's on 14222, and I could listen for that. I'm not hearing anything right now, and that's the thing, is sometimes you'll see something and you don't always hear it. But don't just, if you were going to set something similar to what I have set up here, don't just look at the waterfall and say, oh, there's nothing there. Because sometimes when it's not showing me anything, I still hear stuff on the radio, and I still even can occasionally make a contact, even though it's going to be, a 5.1 or a 4.9 or a pretty light, weak signal. It doesn't mean you can't get through. You're not always going to get through. But these tools will help, right? They help us to spot and identify activities. Go back over to 40 meters, 80 meters. You can hop your bands very quickly, see what's happening, see what's going on. And between the waterfall of the software-defined radio and the clusters, right, which is just that reporting of the contacts through Log4OM, N1MM logger also does a similar thing. It can maybe help you spot the activities that are out there, so you can go right to those. Again, maybe spend less time looking for contacts and maybe some more time actually on the mic. So that kind of wraps it up, I think. HAMRadio, I'm going to just open that up again, just so we can see it again. Set up HAMRadio. It's a free little piece of software, at least for Windows. And then that'll create your COM ports in your computer, and then set up your software. And if you have the MFJ 1708B that we see there in the browser, then you can safely use all three setups or your real radio and the software-defined radio simultaneously, and you know you're not going to damage the software-defined radio. So that's what I've got set up, and I just kind of wanted to show this. Again, the point of this series is largely about possibilities. What kinds of things are out there? What are some of the options we have available? You may have to do a little bit of digging on your particular situation with your particular radio, but you know, that's basically what I did. And I said, oh, what kind of things are out there? What can we do? Why does my radio have a USB port on the back? And it just kind of led to some of these discoveries. And there's further videos on all these, you know, and of course each one of these has their own tech support and websites and things out there. So again, it's just kind of helping make sure that we are aware of what some of the possibilities are. Yeah, these won't be for everybody, but I think some of us might enjoy this kind of thing. So I think we'll wrap this one up, this part of the series. We might have a part 4. We'll see what's going on. I think Brian, KY4BDP, and I were talking. There might end up being a part 4 to this. We'll see. But this kind of wraps up the initial concept of this little series for using software-defined radio, logging software, and a couple of other components, some software and a little hardware device to give us some rig control. So this is Chris, KY4CKP. We'll go ahead and wrap it up for Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association 73.